Welcome to Grace with Paul Gray. Appreciate you all joining me again today. I want to pick up where I left off yesterday, talking a little bit more about comparing things that are true of the only true God when we hear about Him and about us and about other people, and the things that are contrary to that. And yesterday I just briefly touched on the church of Galatia. And I want to pick that up again. The Apostle Paul started this church. They got off to a great start. He left, and then some people who preached a mixture of Jesus plus law, plus things you had to do to please God, to get right with God, came in and started messing these people up. There's Paul calls it a very clear contrast between the only gospel and a distorted gospel. And here's what he says. This is from the Passion Translation. He said, I'm shocked over how quickly you've strayed away from the one who called you into the grace of Christ. I'm frankly astounded that you now embrace a distorted gospel. This is a fake gospel that is simply not true. There is only one gospel, the gospel of the Messiah. Yet you have allowed those who mingle law with grace to confuse you with lies. He said, I want to make it clear. Anybody brings you a different gospel than the grace gospel, let them be condemned and accursed. Boy, that's pretty strong language. He goes on to say, God called him by grace, and in love he chose him from his birth to be his. God's grace unveiled Jesus in Paul so that Paul would proclaim him in the non-Jewish people of the world. Now, there's a whole lot just in those few little verses there, and I can't unpack it all in 6 minutes or so. But what I do want to say, I want you to see this contrast between the only true gospel. Paul calls it the gospel of Christ, or the genuine gospel, or the only one true message, or the good news, as opposed to anything less than that, anything that has even a little mixture of that. Any mixture would be anything you have to do to get right with God, anything you have to do to please God, anything that would make God mad at you so that God would punish you, anything that would exclude you or other people, anything that would diminish other people, those types of things. Just the one little phrase there where he says, you've allowed those who minister law with grace to confuse you with lies and embrace a distorted gospel. If you look up the original Greek word for distorted there, and you look at how it's translated in many other translations, which is very easy to do. You just go online to some place like BibleStudyTools.com, and you go to the Interlinear Bible, you type in the verse, and then you can get about 100 and so different translations. They translate that distorted thing like this: pervert, misleading, counterfeit, distort, change, make a travesty of, twist, turn into lies, confuse, and make variant. Those are not good things. And it only takes just a little bit, as Jesus said one time, just a little bit of leaven can affect the whole, all the yeast in a bread. You put just a little drop of dirt or excrement or whatever into a gallon of water, and it makes the whole thing not pure anymore. That's why it's so important that we know and that we teach and that we live by the only true gospel, which has no requirements at all. It's all what God has done for us. It's all a grace gift. It's all unconditional. So I encourage you to study the book of Galatians, which was written about this whole topic, especially there in the first chapter. And I'm going to come back tomorrow, and since I've got, I don't know, maybe 75 or 80 of these different comparison things, we'll talk about some more tomorrow. Like we'll talk about how the perverted gospel says that we must produce faith, but the real true gospel says that there's only one faith, and it's the faith of Christ, and that covers us, and that we have his faith, from his faith to our faith. That's just one thing. See, some of these things sound good. They say, well, you got to have faith. Well, we've heard that so often. We've heard it in church. That sounds good. Well, of course, who wouldn't think that's right? But the opposite is, the truth is, we have faith, and not just a little bit of faith. We have the faith of Christ. When you understand this, you go from darkness into light. And that's what we're all about doing here. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'll see you next time.